Before you seek to influence another, dare to meet yourself. In a world loud with persuasion and persuasion masquerading as connection, remember this. The most magnetic power a human being holds is the quiet force of authenticity. Not a mask worn to be liked, not a role played to be followed, but the deep-rooted presence of a soul who has met their own darkness and did not flinch. To win friends, one must first become a friend. To the lonely child within, to the silent longings ignored, to the shadow that walks behind every gesture and word. You will never understand another until you understand yourself. That is the beginning of all influence, not in techniques, not in tricks of speech, but in the raw truth of your being, lived and known. Each person you meet is a mystery carved in divine complexity. And yet, how swiftly we flatten others into characters in our play, instead of honoring the great myth they are living. The moment you stop trying to fix, convince, or impress, and instead start witnessing, the sacred alchemy begins. Influence does not rise from domination. It is born when another sees their own soul mirrored in your presence. But you must become a clear mirror. Listen, not with your ears alone, but with your whole spirit. Most people are starving, not for advice, but for someone to feel them, really feel them. In a distracted world, focused presence is the rarest gift. Give that. You will need no other strategy, and beware the projections, the fantasies and fears you cast like veils upon the faces of others. The enemy of true connection is not conflict, it is illusion. The moment you drop your story about who they are and who you are supposed to be, you enter truth. And in truth, hearts move. In truth, lives change. Respect the soul in front of you, not as someone to use, convert, or charm, but as a sacred traveler. Perhaps they are carrying pain you've never tasted. Perhaps they've seen stars you've never imagined. Their experience, though different, is no less divine. To influence rightly is to become small, not diminished, but surrendered. The ego cannot lead the dance of connection. It only knows how to compete. It is the humble heart, the open hand, the quiet courage to see and be seen that transforms strangers into allies and moments into lifelong bonds. This is not charisma. This is not manipulation. This is soul work. You want to win friends, let them win with you. Let them feel safe. Let them feel seen. Let them feel significant, not because you said something clever, but because you were fully there. If you dare to love without needing, to listen without judging, to lead without seeking applause, then you have already mastered the greatest influence of all. You have become a presence that awakens presence. And in this awakening, the world will follow, not because you demanded it, but because you reminded it of what it had forgotten, that every heart, no matter how guarded, is longing to connect, to be changed, to come home. Start with yourself, and the rest will unfold like a sacred dream. Authentic connection begins not on the surface of our interactions with others, but in the deeper, often unexplored terrain of the self. To touch another soul meaningfully, we must first have the courage to touch our own. Many people go through life attempting to build relationships, win approval, gain influence, or be seen, all without truly seeing themselves. This creates not connection, but performance. What is offered is not the true self, but a curated self, a mask shaped by unconscious desires, fears, and societal expectations. And while such a mask might temporarily attract others, it cannot sustain genuine connection, for it is not grounded in reality. When a person has not yet encountered their inner world, has not faced their contradictions, their hidden wounds, their unresolved longings, they are fragmented. They speak from one part of themselves while suppressing others. They love with conditions, listen with filters, and react from unhealed places. The result is disconnection disguised as closeness. One may be surrounded by people, yet feel utterly alone. That loneliness is not the absence of company, but the absence of authenticity in our interactions. Without inner wholeness, our relationships become projections, performances, or power struggles, never true communion. To become whole is to turn inward and face the myriad aspects of the self, especially those parts we were taught to reject. The anger we hide, the grief we avoid, the shame we bury, the dreams we abandoned, all must be acknowledged, held, and integrated. This journey requires immense courage because it demands the dismantling of the false self we've constructed for survival. Yet it is only through this process of inner integration that we become capable of offering something real to others. Until we make peace with our own inner contradictions, we will be unable to hold space for the contradictions of others. We will judge what we fear within ourselves and condemn it when we see it mirrored in someone else. Many people believe that connection is about saying the right things, appearing agreeable, or avoiding conflict. But authentic connection is far more than behavioral alignment. It is energetic resonance. It is one soul recognizing another without pretense. This resonance cannot occur if the self is fragmented. You cannot offer presence to another if you are absent from yourself. You cannot see another clearly if your own inner world remains a mystery. What we have not explored in ourselves, we cannot understand in others. What we reject within, we unconsciously reject outside. This is why inner wholeness is the foundation of meaningful relationships. A person who has journeyed within becomes a sanctuary for others. They do not demand perfection because they have faced their own imperfections. They do not react defensively because they have made peace with their wounds. They do not seek validation because they have validated themselves. This inner security allows them to be truly present, to listen without interrupting, to empathize without projecting, to speak without needing to impress. Such presence is rare and it is magnetic. It draws others not through charm, but through depth. It invites vulnerability, truth, and transformation. Inner wholeness also transforms the way we perceive conflict. When we are fragmented, conflict feels like a threat, something to avoid or control. But when we are whole, conflict becomes an opportunity for deeper understanding. We do not need others to agree with us in order to feel safe. We can listen to opposing views without feeling diminished. We can hold emotional tension without collapsing or retaliating. This capacity for holding complexity without judgment is the hallmark of inner maturity, and it makes genuine connection possible. For in truth, no two people are entirely alike. Real connection is not the merging of identical minds, but the sacred tension between unique perspectives held in mutual respect. Another consequence of inner wholeness is the dissolution of neediness. Many people approach relationships with unconscious expectations. To be saved, to be completed, to be constantly reassured. These needs are not wrong, but when they are unexamined, they distort the dynamics of connection. They turn love into dependency, conversation into manipulation, and friendship into performance. But when a person becomes whole within themselves, their relationships become expressions of fullness rather than strategies for filling a void. They do not seek others to complete them, but to share with them. This sharing, free of expectation and rooted in presence, becomes the ground of authentic intimacy. Furthermore, inner wholeness deepens our capacity for empathy. True empathy is not merely understanding another's point of view. It is the ability to enter their world without losing your own center. This requires a stable inner self, one that has confronted its own shadows and embraced its own humanity. The more we recognize our own fears, desires, and contradictions, the more easily we can recognize them in others, without judgment or superiority. We stop needing people to behave a certain way to make us comfortable. because we have become comfortable with the discomfort of our own complexity. In this space, others feel safe to be real, to open up, to connect. But inner wholeness is not a static achievement. It is an ongoing process of integration. Life constantly reveals new aspects of ourselves through our relationships. Every person we meet reflects something within us, sometimes light, sometimes shadow. The ego may resist these reflections, especially when they are painful, but the soul welcomes them as invitations to grow. A whole person does not deny these mirrors. They embrace them, knowing that each encounter is a teacher, each discomfort a doorway, each conflict a revelation. This path is not easy. It often requires solitude, silence, and surrender. It may lead you through grief, rage, confusion, or despair. But these are not signs of failure. They are signs of depth. They indicate that the work is real. In our world, where distractions are plenty and superficiality is celebrated, the journey inward is an act of rebellion and redemption. It is a reclaiming of soul in a society that has traded depth for efficiency and connection for performance. When we dare to do this inner work, the quality of all our relationships changes. We no longer chase people who do not see us because we have seen ourselves. We no longer betray our truth for acceptance because we have accepted our truth. We no longer fear loneliness because we have befriended our aloneness. This kind of person is powerful, not because they control others, but because they are sovereign within. Their presence becomes a balm in a fragmented world. Others feel seen in their presence, not because they are being analyzed, but because they are being received, fully and without condition. This is the essence of authentic connection. It is not about charisma, cleverness, or conformity. It is about wholeness. It is about becoming so deeply rooted in your own being that your very presence invites others into theirs. It is about knowing your darkness so that you do not fear it in others. It is about loving yourself fiercely enough that your love for others is not needy, but liberating. To connect with another is a sacred act. It is a meeting of mysteries, a dance of two universes. But that dance cannot be choreographed from the outside. It must arise from the music within, and that music only plays when the soul is in tune with itself. So before you seek to be heard, learn to listen to the whispers of your own soul, to the cries of your forgotten self, to the echoes of all you have hidden or denied. For only then can you offer a listening that heals. Only then can you offer a presence that transforms. Only then can you connect, not as a role, not as a mask, but as a whole and living soul. Every relationship is a mirror, a sacred and sometimes unsettling reflection of who we are beneath the surface. The people we draw close, the ones we fall in love with, the ones who infuriate us or stir deep admiration within us, all are reflecting back to us something that lies within. This is not always obvious, and often it is precisely what we refuse to see that gets projected outward most strongly. What we fail to accept in ourselves, we will almost inevitably encounter in others. The shadow, that vast realm of unconscious traits, feelings, fears, and longings we deny, finds expression not just in solitude, but vividly in relationship. To resent someone's arrogance may be to deny the part of yourself that longs to be unapologetically bold. To be irritated by someone's neediness may reflect your own unmet needs that you've buried under a mask of self-reliance. To envy someone's success is often to confront the dormant dreams you've silenced in yourself. To admire someone's courage, sensitivity, or creativity may be to witness the dormant potential within you crying out for expression. Relationships awaken what sleeps inside us, whether it's welcome or not. The shadow in relationships reveals itself most clearly through emotional charge. When someone triggers a strong reaction, anger, resentment, jealousy, adoration, it is rarely about them alone. It is about what they symbolize, what they stir up, what they reflect that we have not yet made peace with. The more intense the reaction, the more likely it is that something unconscious is being activated. This is why the people closest to us often become the greatest irritants or the most powerful teachers. They penetrate our emotional armor and bring to light the parts of ourselves we'd rather keep hidden. This is not a failure of the relationship, but its deepest function. It is in the mirror of relationship that we are offered the raw material for transformation. It takes maturity and inner courage to accept this truth. It is easier to blame others, to externalize discomfort, to remain blind to the role we play in the dynamics we claim to suffer. But if we dare to look within, we often find that the judgments we pass on others are the judgments we carry toward parts of ourselves. Perhaps we scorn someone's vulnerability because we were taught that our own softness was weakness. Perhaps we loathe someone's emotionality because we never learned how to safely express our own feelings. Perhaps we condemn someone's arrogance because we were shamed for claiming our worth. In this way, we become harsh with others, not because we are moral arbiters of their flaws, but because we are terrified of facing our own. This projection of the shadow is often unconscious. We believe we are reacting to someone out there, but in truth, we are reacting to something disowned within. This makes relationships the most fertile ground for self-awareness and growth. Each trigger is an invitation to examine what lies beneath. Each conflict is an opportunity to retrieve a lost part of ourselves. Each feeling of judgment or idealization is a breadcrumb pointing us toward inner work still left undone. If we accept this, relationships become less about changing others and more about reclaiming ourselves. But this process is not about self-blame. Recognizing the shadow in relationships is not about taking fault for everything or excusing poor behavior in others. It is about claiming our emotional reactions as meaningful messengers from within. The way someone treats you may indeed be inappropriate or harmful, but your response to it can still reveal something about your inner world. Do you shrink in the face of anger because you learned to associate conflict with abandonment? Do you tolerate disrespect because you've internalized the belief that your needs are too much? Do you lash out in criticism because you were never taught how to communicate pain with vulnerability? These inner inquiries are the path toward healing. They allow us to break free from the unconscious scripts that otherwise govern our behavior and choices. As we begin to see our relationships through the lens of the shadow, we may notice patterns, recurring conflicts, types of people we attract, ways we self-sabotage or repeat painful dynamics. These are not accidents, they are the psyche's way of seeking integration. We are drawn again and again to relationships that reflect our unhealed wounds, not because we are doomed, but because the soul seeks wholeness. Until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives, and we will call it fate. By facing the shadow within, we begin to change the patterns without. This work, however, is rarely comfortable. It requires a radical honesty that few are willing to endure. It means questioning the stories we've built around our pain. It means sitting with uncomfortable truths, that perhaps we've been emotionally unavailable while accusing others of being distant, that we've been controlling while feeling victimized by others' dominance, that we've been demanding while imagining ourselves as endlessly giving. The ego resists this kind of insight. It prefers the illusion of righteousness to the humility of self-examination. But real transformation only happens when we drop the need to be right and become willing to be real. The beauty of this inner work is that as we integrate the shadow, our relationships begin to change naturally. When we own our vulnerabilities, we become more compassionate toward others. When we acknowledge our envy, we open the door to our own ambitions. When we accept our fear of intimacy, we begin to approach closeness with gentleness instead of defensiveness. As we soften toward the parts of ourselves we once exiled, we become less reactive and more present. Others feel safer with us, not because we've become perfect, but because we've become authentic. This authenticity becomes a magnet for deeper connection. Moreover, seeing the shadow in relationships allows us to hold others with more grace. We begin to understand that everyone is navigating their own inner struggles, that behind every outburst or cold silence is a story, a wound, a fear. This doesn't mean tolerating abuse or sacrificing boundaries, but it does mean resisting the urge to demonize others. We can say no without hatred. We can leave a toxic dynamic without needing to make the other person wrong. We can honor our truth while still holding space for the humanity of the other. Even in romantic love, the shadow plays a pivotal role. Often, we are most deeply drawn to those who reflect back parts of ourselves we've disowned. The passionate intensity of new love frequently stems from this projection. We see in the other a lost piece of our soul. But if we do not recognize this, we are destined to become disillusioned. The very traits that once enchanted us may begin to irritate or frighten us. The partner we admired for their confidence we now resent for their dominance. The one we adored for their spontaneity we now criticize for their lack of structure. This is not a sign that love has died, but that the shadow has emerged. It is here that true love begins, not in the projection of perfection, but in the acceptance of imperfection, in the willingness to see the other as they are, and to be seen in return. In friendships, too, the shadow operates subtly. We may idolize a friend for their strength, unaware that we are disowning our own. We may feel betrayed when they assert boundaries, not realizing we've expected them to carry our emotional burdens. We may withdraw when they grow, because it confronts our own stagnation. These dynamics can be painful, but they are also profound invitations to grow. Every rupture, every discomfort, every moment of jealousy or distance can be a teacher if we are willing to look inward. The path of shadow integration in relationships is not linear. We will continue to be triggered, to project, to stumble. But over time, as our awareness deepens, our reactions soften. We become less fused with the shadow, more capable of observing it without being possessed by it. We can catch ourselves mid-reaction and choose differently. We can pause before projecting and inquire within. We can embrace conflict as a gateway to self-knowledge rather than as something to avoid or conquer. Ultimately, every relationship offers us a sacred mirror. The ones that wound us show us where we have yet to heal. The ones that inspire us point to what we are ready to become. The ones that frustrate us illuminate where we are stuck. The ones that nourish us reflect how far we've come. When we recognize this, we stop seeking perfect people and start seeking realness. We stop fearing pain and start welcoming truth. We stop blaming and start transforming. To see the shadow in relationship is not to despair, it is to awaken. It is to reclaim power from the unconscious and bring light to what has long lived in the dark. It is the beginning of freedom, of empathy, of intimacy, not built on illusion, but on truth. And truth, even when uncomfortable, is the only foundation upon which real love, real connection, and real transformation can be built. True influence does not arise from the impulse to dominate or persuade through force, but from the ability to genuinely understand the world through the eyes of another. It is not achieved through clever words, assertive body language, or strategies of manipulation, but through the silent, profound act of empathy. Empathy is not pity. It is not condescension. It is the sacred art of entering another person's inner world without trying to fix, control, or judge it. To influence someone deeply, you must first be willing to feel with them, to sit beside their reality, and to suspend your own opinions long enough to truly listen. At the core of every human being is a desire to be understood. This longing surpasses the desire to be agreed with, praised, or even comforted. To be understood is to feel seen in one's wholeness, not just in one's words, but in one's emotions, fears, and hopes. It is this act of being seen that dissolves defenses and invites transformation. When someone feels deeply understood, they begin to lower the walls they've built around themselves. Their nervous system relaxes, their sense of isolation eases, they begin to trust, not because you have argued well, but because you have loved well. This is why empathy holds more power than any forceful persuasion ever could. Control, whether subtle or overt, always meets resistance. Even if a person complies, there is often quiet resentment or emotional disconnection that undermines the relationship. Control triggers the instinct to defend the self. It creates separation, even when it appears to succeed. Empathy, on the other hand, creates connection. It moves beneath defenses and touches the heart. It says, "You are safe with me. You are allowed to feel what you feel. I will not punish your truth with judgment." To lead, to teach, to guide, to influence. These are not roles reserved only for those in positions of power. Every human interaction holds the potential for influence. The way we speak to a friend in pain, the way we respond to a child's confusion, the way we listen to a colleague's frustration. All of these are moments where we can either deepen connection or create distance. When we approach these moments with empathy, we build bridges. We become not just a presence in someone's life, but a force that shapes their inner world toward healing, trust, and transformation. Empathy does not mean agreeing with everything or allowing yourself to be mistreated. It means recognizing the emotional reality of another without needing to impose your own narrative upon it. It means asking, what is this person feeling beneath their words? What fear, wound, or longing is shaping this moment? Instead of reacting to someone's behavior, empathy invites us to respond to their humanity. It calls us to see past the mask they wear, the defenses they use, and to touch the tender, often hidden core beneath. This is not always easy. The ego resists empathy when it feels threatened. When someone behaves aggressively, our instinct is to match their aggression or retreat in self-protection. But beneath every act of anger is often a wound, and beneath every wound is a story. The one who lashes out may be terrified. The one who withdraws may be aching for connection. The one who boasts may be drowning in insecurity. When we choose empathy, we are choosing to see these deeper layers, not to excuse harmful behavior, but to meet it with the kind of understanding that invites transformation instead of escalation. Empathy also requires presence. We cannot understand someone's experience if we are half listening, distracted by our own inner chatter, or preoccupied with how we are being perceived. To be empathic is to offer undivided attention, to become quiet enough inside ourselves to make space for another's truth. This is a radical act in a world where so much of communication is transactional, hurried, and superficial. Presence communicates you matter. Your experience is valid. I am not here to fix you, I am here to walk beside you. In that space, people begin to unfold. They begin to speak from deeper places, and from those deeper places, real change begins. Empathy is not weakness. It is one of the most courageous capacities a person can cultivate. To empathize is to make oneself vulnerable to another's suffering. It is to risk being touched, changed, even unsettled by their truth. It requires strength to remain open in the presence of pain, especially when that pain mirrors our own unhealed wounds. But it is precisely this openness that makes us powerful. A person who can sit with another's grief without needing to escape it is a person who can lead with wisdom. A person who can hold space for another's anger without becoming defensive is a person who can disarm hostility with grace. A person who can validate another's fear without diminishing it is a person who inspires trust. True influence is not about what we say, but about how we make people feel. A person may forget your words, but they will remember the safety they felt in your presence. They will remember the way you made them feel seen when they were hiding, understood when they were confused, accepted when they felt ashamed. This kind of influence is lasting because it touches the soul. It does not coerce, it awakens. It does not overpower, it uplifts. Empathy also transforms conflict. Most conflicts are not about the surface issues we argue over. They are about feeling misunderstood, dismissed, or unseen. When empathy enters a conflict, the dynamic shifts. Instead of defending positions, people begin to explore emotions. Instead of arguing facts, they begin to share stories. Instead of seeking victory, they begin to seek understanding. This shift does not guarantee agreement, but it creates a space where both parties can be human, and often, this is all that's needed for resolution to begin. In families, in workplaces, in communities, the lack of empathy breeds disconnection. Misunderstandings multiply, resentments build, people stop listening and start defending. In such an environment, influence becomes a struggle, communication becomes manipulation. But when empathy is present, even difficult conversations become sacred ground. People feel safe to speak truthfully. They feel respected even when there is disagreement. They feel open to being influenced because they do not feel coerced. Empathy also allows us to meet people where they are, rather than where we think they should be. We all grow at different paces, shaped by different histories, traumas, and circumstances. To influence someone from a place of empathy is to honor their journey without imposing your timeline upon them. It is to speak to their current experience with compassion and clarity, rather than demanding that they be ready for something they are not yet able to receive. This kind of influence plants seeds. It may not yield immediate results, but it creates the conditions for growth over time. And yet, empathy must be authentic. People can sense when empathy is a tactic rather than a truth. Manipulated empathy is simply disguised control. True empathy comes from a place of sincerity, from a heart that genuinely wants to understand rather than to convince. This sincerity is what builds trust, and trust is the foundation of real influence. Where there is no trust, words fall flat. Where there is trust, even a whisper can carry great weight. To cultivate empathy is to deepen one's relationship not only with others, but also with oneself. We cannot offer understanding to others that we have not yet given to ourselves. If we have rejected our own sadness, we will struggle to sit with another's tears. If we have denied our own anger, we will judge it in someone else. If we have numbed our own fear, we will be impatient with the fear of others. Empathy begins with self-empathy, with the courage to feel our own feelings, to listen to our own inner voice, to accept our own humanity without shame. From this inner foundation, empathy for others becomes natural and sincere. Ultimately, influence rooted in empathy is the kind that elevates both the giver and the receiver. It is not about hierarchy, superiority, or control. It is about relationship, presence, and shared humanity. It is about creating spaces where people feel safe enough to grow, brave enough to change, and seen enough to heal. In such spaces, transformation happens, not because it was demanded, but because it was invited. Empathy does not guarantee that everyone will agree with you or follow your lead, but it ensures that your presence leaves a mark of dignity, compassion, and truth. It ensures that when you speak, people will listen, not out of fear, but out of trust. It ensures that your influence is not fleeting, but foundational. In a world that often seeks to influence through force, speed, and noise, empathy is the quiet force that truly moves people. It is not flashy. It is not immediate, but it is enduring, and in the end, it is empathy, not power, that changes hearts. It is empathy, not persuasion, that builds bridges. It is empathy, not control, that leads people home to themselves. Most of what a person communicates is not carried in the words they speak, but in the space between them. The true language of the soul reveals itself not just in what is said, but in how it is said, and often in what is left unsaid. If you seek to truly understand another person, not simply to react, but to truly see them, you must train yourself to listen beyond language. You must begin to hear with your whole being. The tone in their voice, the rhythm of their breath, the way their hands fidget, the pause before they respond, the tightening of their shoulders. These are not mere side notes to communication. They are the language beneath the language, the unconscious truth rising to the surface, if only someone is quiet enough to hear it. When we listen only to words, we are easily deceived. People have learned to speak from the surface. They have learned to say what is acceptable, what is expected, what is rehearsed. But underneath the practiced language lies a deeper current, the energy of the person, their emotion, their uncertainty, their longing. You can sit across from someone who says they're fine while their eyes say otherwise. You can hear someone explain their success while their body carries the tension of exhaustion or fear. You can listen to a story filled with laughter that echoes with grief. To listen beyond words is to develop the sensitivity to feel what is truly being communicated. This kind of listening requires presence, not just physical presence, but the stillness of internal openness. Most people do not truly listen. They wait for their turn to speak. They mentally prepare replies. They filter everything through their own agenda or assumptions. But to listen deeply is to become empty enough to receive. It is to quiet the internal dialogue, to soften the need to fix, to resist the impulse to interpret. It is to become a vessel for the other's truth, to allow what they are spoken and unspoken, to arise in your awareness without resistance. This form of listening is both an art and a discipline. It requires attunement to subtlety. It requires you to observe tone as if it were melody, gesture as if it were poetry, silence as if it were sacred. A person's hesitation can speak volumes about their fear. A raised voice may not be anger, but desperation. A hand covering the mouth might signal shame. A sudden change in topic could be a sign of vulnerability too deep to touch. The one who truly listens learns to honor these subtle signs, not as data to be analyzed, but as expressions of the soul. In doing so, they create a space where the unspoken is allowed to emerge without force. Often, people don't know how to express what they feel. They are not hiding. It's just that the words don't yet exist for what they carry. They have not yet made sense of the experience themselves. This is especially true in moments of grief, trauma, confusion, or profound transformation. When someone is going through an experience that exceeds their current language, they may stumble, contradict themselves, speak in metaphors, or fall into silence. These moments require patience, not pressure. They require someone who can listen not just to clarify, but to witness. Silence, in particular, is deeply revealing. Most people are uncomfortable with silence. They rush to fill it, fearing it signals awkwardness, disinterest, or lack of insight. But silence, when held with presence, becomes a container for what is raw, tender, and true. Sometimes, what someone cannot say is the most honest part of their story. Sometimes, the tears that arise in silence reveal more than any speech could. Sometimes the long pause before a simple "I'm okay" says everything. Those who can sit with silence, without rushing to fill it, fix it, or flee from it, offer a rare and healing presence. Listening beyond words also means paying attention to what is inconsistent. When someone's words do not align with their energy, there is often a deeper truth waiting to be gently uncovered. A person might describe a happy event with a flat tone. They might express anger with a smile. These incongruities are not lies. They are protective strategies. The human psyche is layered. Often, People present a version of themselves that feels safer, even if it's not fully true. A good listener does not expose these layers with interrogation. Instead, they allow space for the truth to unfold naturally. They create an atmosphere where defenses are not needed, where the deeper self feels safe to emerge. This level of listening creates trust. When someone feels that you are hearing not just their words but their being, they begin to open. They begin to risk honesty. They begin to feel seen, not as an idea, a role, or a label, but as a living, breathing human soul. This kind of listening can be deeply healing. Many people go through life unseen, unheard, and misunderstood. They carry stories that have never been told, wounds that have never been acknowledged, dreams that have never been mirrored. When someone comes along who can hear the heartbeat beneath the sentence, who can feel the ache behind the smile, who can honor the truth in silence, that person becomes a mirror in which the other can finally see themselves clearly. But this listening is not just for others. It transforms the listener as well. To attune yourself to another's subtle reality is to expand your own. You become more sensitive, more present, more human. You begin to carry a kind of wisdom that cannot be taught, only felt. You develop the capacity to hold contradictions, to sit with mystery, to love without needing certainty. You begin to realize that communication is not about clever articulation, but about resonance. Two people resonating at the level of soul. This is where real connection is born. In this way, listening becomes an act of love. And not romantic love, but sacred love. The kind that says, I will meet you where you are. I will not rush your process. I will not reduce you to my understanding. I will let you be who you are, even if I do not fully grasp it. This kind of love liberates. It allows people to stop performing. It allows the masks to fall. It allows vulnerability to become sacred rather than shameful. And in this space, true transformation can occur. There is also a practical dimension to this kind of listening. In relationships, whether personal or professional, much conflict arises not from disagreement, but from feeling unheard. When people feel that their deeper emotions are ignored or dismissed, they become defensive. They shut down or lash out. But when someone feels truly heard, not just their words, but the emotion behind them, they soften. They become more willing to listen in return. The conversation deepens. Solutions become possible. Mutual understanding grows. In this way, listening becomes not only a spiritual practice, but a practical tool for harmony. Of course, listening beyond words requires boundaries as well. Empaths and sensitive people, in particular, must learn how to stay grounded while tuning into others. Deep listening does not mean taking on another's pain or losing yourself in their story. It means being a clear mirror, not a sponge. It means being rooted in your own presence, so you can truly witness another without becoming entangled. This balance is crucial, for when empathy is combined with clarity, listening becomes a force for growth, not just for the one being heard, but for the listener as well. There is also great wisdom in learning to listen to the collective silence. In a world filled with noise, attention becomes a rare and sacred gift. Most people are bombarded by stimuli, distracted by devices, and rarely given the gift of true presence. To listen deeply, to look someone in the eyes and truly take in their being, is to offer something revolutionary. It is to say, I see you, I hear you, I honor your truth. This kind of presence can change lives, sometimes more than any advice or action ever could. Even in moments when words are required, when guidance, feedback, or clarity is needed, if they emerge from a place of deep listening, they land differently. Words spoken from the surface may sound correct but fail to touch. Words born from deep attunement carry a different weight. They arise from the silence within and carry the resonance of truth. People recognize this. They feel the difference between being advised and being understood. They feel the difference between being spoken to and being seen. To listen beyond words is not to become a master of technique, but a student of presence. It is not about analysis, but about attunement. It is not about reading people like books, but about meeting them as mysteries. The more we listen in this way, the more we begin to hear the music behind the noise, the cry behind the anger, the plea behind the silence. We begin to move through the world with more grace, more compassion, more wisdom. And in doing so, we become not just listeners, but healers, not in the sense of fixing others, but in the deeper sense of helping them return to themselves. So much suffering arises because people do not feel heard. So much healing begins the moment they do. When you learn to listen not just with your ears, but with your heart, your eyes, your stillness, you begin to speak the unspoken language of the soul. In that space, everything changes. We walk through life not merely with open eyes, but with minds full of unseen assumptions. Each encounter with another is shaped not just by what is present, but by what we carry within us. The heartaches unhealed, the desires unfulfilled, the fears unresolved. They color how we see others, often more than reality itself. Projection is this invisible veil. It is not an act of malice, but one of unconsciousness. It happens when the human psyche, unable to face its own contents directly, casts them onto the world outside. And in the realm of relationships, projection is the silent saboteur. It interrupts connection by replacing the reality of the other with the echo of ourselves. When we project, we do not see the person before us as they are. We see them as a reflection of something within us. The man who mistrusts others may be carrying betrayal he has never healed from. The woman who idealizes a partner might be longing for a part of herself she has disowned. The friend who sees judgment in every word may be wrestling with shame too deep to name. We believe we are perceiving others clearly, when in fact we are only encountering a distorted image shaped by our inner landscape. This is the tragedy of projection. It offers the illusion of intimacy while keeping us locked in separation. Projection is not something we do deliberately. It arises from the depths of the unconscious. It is the mind's attempt to make sense of the unknown by overlaying the known. If you grew up fearing abandonment, you might see rejection where there is none. If you carry deep self-doubt, you might imagine others are constantly judging you. If you have unhealed rage, you might find reasons to accuse others of hostility. These projections become the filter through which you interpret every gesture, every silence, every word, and the deeper the wound, the thicker the filter. What makes projection so dangerous is that it feels real. When someone says something neutral and you hear criticism, the emotional response is immediate. You feel hurt or defensive, and that feeling confirms the illusion. I knew they didn't like me, you think, but in truth, what you knew was a story you brought with you, not one grounded in the present moment. This circularity is what keeps projection alive. You react to your own story, then use that reaction to justify the story itself. The result is disconnection. Not only are you disconnected from the other person, you are disconnected from your own true experience. Instead of engaging with the reality before you, you engage with the ghost of your past. This prevents true understanding. You cannot understand someone if you are too busy defending yourself against what you think they mean. You cannot offer compassion if you are stuck in assumptions. You cannot build trust if your fear constantly imagines betrayal. Projection replaces curiosity with certainty, openness with judgment, presence with defense. Relationships, whether with partners, friends, colleagues, or family, are a fertile ground for projection because they touch the core of our identity. The more emotionally significant a relationship is, the more it activates our deepest patterns. This is why even the most loving relationships can suddenly turn volatile. Something small triggers a hidden wound, and suddenly we are no longer responding to the present. We are reacting to an old injury we've never fully acknowledged. The other person becomes the stand-in for someone else, a parent, a past lover, a childhood fear, and the real person disappears under the weight of our projection. But projection isn't only negative. It also includes idealization. When we fall in love, we often project our hopes and dreams onto the other person. We see in them the qualities we long to possess or believe we lack. We make them larger than life, imagining they will complete us or rescue us from our inner void. But this too is a distortion. It places an unbearable burden on the other. No one can carry the responsibility of fulfilling another's unlived life. Eventually, the illusion cracks. The person reveals their humanity, and we feel betrayed, not because they failed us, but because we projected something onto them that was never theirs to hold. The only way out of projection is inward. We must turn the light of awareness onto ourselves. When we notice a strong emotional reaction, whether attraction, irritation, fear, or idealization, we must ask, what is this really about? What part of me is being activated? Is this person truly doing what I think they are? Or am I seeing through the lens of my past? This kind of inner inquiry requires courage. It means facing aspects of ourselves we would rather keep hidden. It means owning our stories instead of blaming others for them. But in this work lies the freedom to connect. To begin dismantling projection, we must also cultivate humility. We must accept that our perception is not pure truth, but a mixture of reality and interpretation. We must be willing to hold our conclusions lightly, to question our certainty, to admit that we do not know everything about another person's intentions. This humility opens the door to deeper listening. It allows us to see the other not as an extension of ourselves, but as a mystery to be encountered. It invites us to engage with curiosity instead of assumption. In this space of humility and awareness, empathy becomes possible. We stop reacting to our projections and begin responding to the actual person before us. We become attuned to their reality, not just our fantasy of who they are. This is where true connection begins. Two people, both owning their inner world, meeting in the vulnerable space between self and other, no longer seeking completion in the other, but offering presence, no longer demanding perfection, but embracing wholeness. This journey is not linear. Even the most self-aware among us will continue to project at times. The key is not to eliminate projection entirely, but to become quicker at recognizing it. Each time we catch ourselves, we reclaim a piece of our awareness. We begin to relate more honestly, more compassionately, more freely. And as we dismantle the projections, we begin to see others more clearly, not as reflections of our wounds or desires, but as unique beings with their own depths. Interestingly, the more we work through our projections, the more we begin to reclaim the parts of ourselves we once disowned. The qualities we admired in others often point to parts of ourselves we have neglected. The traits we hate in others may be unacknowledged aspects of our own psyche. When we bring these projections back home, we integrate, we become more whole, and from this wholeness, our relationships shift. Are no longer driven by unconscious need. They become spaces of shared presence, of mutual growth. Projection is not a flaw to be condemned. It is a function of the psyche trying to navigate a complex world. But it becomes dangerous when it remains unconscious. When we project without awareness, we become trapped in a hall of mirrors, mistaking our own reflection for truth. We miss the beauty of the real human being before us. We become entangled in false narratives. We suffer unnecessarily. But when we bring consciousness to projection, it becomes a doorway into ourselves and into deeper connection with others. Every projection, once revealed, becomes an opportunity to grow, to see where we are still hurting, to recognize what we have not yet claimed, to discover the story behind our reactions, to soften, to open, to connect. This is the invitation to slow down, to listen, to question our first reactions, to become students of our own inner world. When we do this, something profound begins to shift. We start to meet others not with the demand that they fix or fulfill us, but with the intention to understand. We start to see conflict not as proof of betrayal, but as a signal of something unhealed within. We start to relate from the present, not from the past. And from this place, relationships become sacred. Not because they are perfect, but because they become arenas of truth. Places where two evolving souls can reflect, challenge, and support one another without the distortions of projection. Spaces where the walls of fear and fantasy fall away, and what remains is simple, profound presence. When you no longer need others to carry your fears or fulfill your hopes, you are free to love them as they are. When you can see your projections and take responsibility for them, you liberate the other person from the burden of being your mirror. And in that liberation, connection becomes possible, not the connection of roles and masks, but of essence, of soul. In the end, projection dissolves not through analysis, but through awareness, not through blame, but through honesty, not through control, but through surrender to the truth of the moment. And as we let go of who we think others should be, we begin to see who they truly are. We begin to hear what they are really saying. We begin to love them not for who they remind us of, or who we want them to become, but for the miracle of who they are, here and now. Each person you encounter is an unfolding mystery, a living symbol shaped by forces both visible and unseen. Beneath the surface of personality lies an ancient, mythic journey that belongs solely to them, unique, unrepeatable, and sacred. No two souls walk the same path, even if their footsteps echo in similar places. This is the heart of true connection, the willingness to honor rather than control, to witness rather than impose, to revere the sovereign depth of another's being rather than reduce them to a reflection of our needs or expectations. From the very beginning, human beings have sought to understand one another through the lens of similarity. We bond over shared beliefs, familiar stories, and common values. But this tendency, while natural, can also become a trap. We begin to assume that others should think as we think, desire what we desire, choose what we would choose. We project our path onto theirs and expect them to follow a script that was never written for them. In doing so, we abandon reverence for the mystery of individuality. To honor another's uniqueness requires humility. It demands the recognition that life is not one path, but a multiplicity of paths. Each soul comes into the world with its own calling, its own challenges, and its own archetypal patterns that shape the course of its becoming. Some are meant to be warriors, others poets. Some will walk through deep forests of solitude. Others will dance in the marketplaces of the world. Some are born to break cycles, others to continue them with new awareness. When we attempt to mold others into our image or conform them to our comfort, we not only dishonor their individuality, we interrupt the sacred process of their becoming. Every person is born into a world of forces that extend beyond their conscious awareness. Family dynamics, cultural narratives, inherited patterns, and unconscious archetypes shape their path. These forces call each individual toward growth, suffering, transformation, and eventual integration. When we encounter someone at a particular stage of their journey, we are not seeing their whole story. We are glimpsing a chapter, often one in which they themselves are still learning the theme. Our judgments, then, are premature. Our assumptions are often projections, and our attempts to intervene may do more harm than good, if not grounded in respect. To truly honor another's path is to recognize that what looks like a mistake to us may be a necessary descent for them. What appears as confusion may be the fertile chaos preceding an inner reordering. The relationship that seems dysfunctional may be the crucible in which they are burning away illusions. What we think they should have learned by now may be the very lesson they were born to encounter again and again until it cracks open their soul. When we rush another person's unfolding, we rob them of the wisdom that only time, trial, and personal discovery can offer. We do this not out of cruelty, but often out of fear or attachment. Parents push children to fulfill dreams they themselves abandoned. Partners attempt to fix or change each other to soothe their own discomfort. Friends give advice not to liberate but to validate their own worldview. Teachers and mentors may unconsciously sculpt their students in their own image, but the soul resists all false shaping. It may comply outwardly, but inwardly it rebels. The deeper self, the self that holds the blueprint of one's true becoming, will eventually assert itself, sometimes through breakdowns, conflicts, or quiet estrangement. These eruptions are not failures. They are reminders that no one can walk another's path, no matter how much they love them. Respecting someone's archetypal journey does not mean remaining passive or indifferent. It means relating with presence and discernment rather than control. It means being a witness rather than an architect. It means asking, what is life asking of them now, rather than how can I make them more like me? It is a sacred act to hold space for someone's becoming, to walk beside them without directing their steps, to offer truth without attachment to outcome. When we stop trying to mold others, we begin to truly see them. Their quirks become symbols, their contradictions become invitations to deeper inquiry, their struggles become sacred initiations. We learn to recognize the language of their soul, not just their words or actions, but the deeper patterns at play. We notice when they are in a descent, not to be rescued, but to be held in patience. We witness their ascent with celebration, not jealousy or fear. We come to trust the rhythm of their transformation, even when it does not match our timeline or preference. This kind of reverence is especially needed in love. Many relationships falter not because of lack of love, but because one or both people refuse to accept the other's individuality. We want our partner to grow, but in the direction we envision. We support their dreams, but only if they do not disrupt our own. We love who they were and struggle with who they are becoming. But love that does not honor individuality is not love. It is possession. And possession kills the soul. To love someone deeply is to say, I see your path, and even when I do not understand it, I trust it. I will not stand in the way of your transformation, even if it changes what we have known. This applies not only to romantic relationships, but to all human connections. In parenting, the temptation to impose our values onto our children is powerful, but ultimately destructive. The child is not a vessel to be filled with our dreams. They are a fire to be tended in their own direction. In friendships, we must learn to hold space for change, even when it challenges our sense of stability. In leadership, we must guide without domination, recognizing that each person under our care has their own sacred contract with life. In teaching, we must evoke rather than indoctrinate, allowing each student to awaken their inner authority. To live this way requires that we ourselves do the inner work of self-discovery. Only when we have begun to walk our own archetypal path can we recognize the validity of another's. If we are still entangled in people, pleasing, conformity, or unprocessed trauma, we will seek to control others as a way of regulating ourselves. But when we begin to stand in our own scent, honoring our own journey, owning our shadow, embracing our uniqueness, we find it easier to do the same for others. We become less threatened by difference, less reactive to divergence, more curious and compassionate. We no longer need others to be like us in order to feel safe. We are grounded in the knowledge that every path is part of the greater wholeness. The world suffers greatly from the refusal to honor individuality. Societies try to mold people into obedient citizens, suppressing their eccentricity and dissent. Religions impose fixed roles and deny the wildness of spiritual longing. Families shame difference and reward compliance. But the soul cannot be standardized. It was not born to conform, but to express, to create, to transform. The more we try to make others fit our mold, the more we wound them and ourselves. For every time we deny someone's uniqueness, we deny our own. We reinforce the illusion that only certain paths are valid, only certain ways of being are acceptable. But life, in its deepest essence, is diversity. The natural world reflects this truth with abundance. No two leaves are identical. No two snowflakes repeat. No two sunsets ever replicate the last. Why then should we expect human souls to follow the same script? The divine intelligence that animates the universe also moves within each individual, calling them to unfold in a way that is uniquely theirs. Our task is not to direct this unfolding, but to support it, to make space for it, to celebrate it, to bow before the sacred strangeness of every soul. When we learn to do this, connection becomes deeper, more authentic, more alive. We begin to experience true intimacy, not the merging of identities, but the dance of difference. We stop trying to fix each other and begin to mirror each other. We stop measuring others against our expectations and begin to honor the journey they are living. In doing so, we create relationships that are not just comforting but transformative. Relationships that do not restrict growth but catalyze it. Relationships that echo the deeper truth that every soul, no matter how familiar or foreign, is walking home to itself in its own time, in its own way. And so, to honor the individual's uniqueness is not only an ethical act, it is a spiritual one. It is a recognition that each person is a manifestation of something eternal, mysterious, and vast. To try to mold them to your path is to reduce the sacred to the familiar. But to stand in awe of their journey, to trust it even when it diverges from your own, is to participate in the divine dance of becoming. It is to love not with attachment, but with reverence. It is to say, I do not need you to be like me to love you. I love you because you are you, because your path, like mine, is sacred. To connect with another human being in a way that is authentic, transformative, and deeply rooted in mutual understanding, one must be willing to undergo a profound inner act, the sacrifice of the ego. This is no small offering. The ego clings tightly to its sense of identity, built upon being right, being in control, being better, or at least being safe in comparison to others. It constructs elaborate fortresses of opinion, judgment, and superiority to preserve its illusion of separateness and self-importance. But these very mechanisms, which we rely upon for a false sense of strength, are the very walls that keep us from truly connecting. Real influence, the kind that touches the soul rather than manipulates behavior, cannot pass through these walls. It requires the openness and humility of one who has laid down the arms of self-defense. To relinquish the ego is not to annihilate the self, but to recognize that the self is something far deeper and wider than the ego imagines. The ego sees life through a narrow lens. It wants to win, to be validated, to prove itself. But the deeper self, the source of genuine presence and wisdom, seeks connection, communion, and transformation. And this self can only emerge when the ego is softened, when its need to dominate is replaced with the willingness to understand, when its need to be right is relinquished in favor of relationship, when its craving to control gives way to surrender and listening. In any conversation, in any relationship, there is a subtle energetic dynamic. If one enters with the unconscious belief that they must impress, persuade, or dominate, they will create a subtle pressure, a push that the other person instinctively resists. This resistance might not be verbal. It might appear as distraction, withdrawal, or tension, but it is felt. The human psyche knows when it is being seen as an object rather than a presence. And when we speak from ego, trying to gain status, validation, or agreement, we are not speaking to the other as a sovereign soul, but as a projection screen upon which we throw our inner insecurities or grandiosity. This is why ego-driven communication so often fails to reach the heart. It may win arguments, but it loses intimacy. It may gather followers, but not deep loyalty. It may gain attention, but not trust. True influence, one that awakens, liberates, and elevates, is born not from the need to appear superior, but from the willingness to be fully present, to risk vulnerability, and to relate without masks. To sacrifice the ego is to enter the space of connection empty-handed. It is to drop the pretense of always having the answer. It is to listen without mentally preparing a counterpoint. It is to see the other not as a rival or a mirror, but as a mystery. And this kind of presence is magnetic. People are drawn to it because it is rare and sacred. In a world that teaches us to posture, compete, and curate, genuine presence is revolutionary. But make no mistake, the sacrifice of ego is not easy. The ego defends itself with narratives, stories in which we are the hero, the victim, the enlightened one, the misunderstood genius, or the righteous outsider. These narratives protect us from the pain of uncertainty, inferiority, and exposure. To give them up is to feel, even if momentarily, the rawness of simply being human, flawed, learning, growing, and unknown. But in that rawness, something beautiful happens. We become real, and only what is real can truly connect. Consider the difference between speaking to prove something and speaking to share something. The former tightens the body, creates separation, and demands affirmation. The latter opens the body, invites intimacy, and requires nothing. When we speak from ego, we are trying to pull something from others. Agreement, praise, obedience. When we speak from the deeper self, we are offering something. Truth, presence, resonance. The first seeks control, the second seeks communion. Relationships, especially those that matter most, are the arenas where this sacrifice is constantly required. In love, one must relinquish the desire to always be right in order to preserve the deeper unity. In friendship, one must give up the compulsion to compare or compete. In leadership, one must shed the illusion of superiority and replace it with service. In dialogue, one must resist the temptation to dominate the space and instead cultivate the humility to let silence speak, to let the other be seen, to let truth unfold on its own terms. Even the act of listening becomes transformative when ego is set aside. Most people do not truly listen. They wait for their turn to speak, or they listen with the intent to correct, fix, or judge. But when we listen without ego, we listen with the whole body, with the heart. We listen not just to the words, but to the tone, the silence, the gesture behind them. And in doing so, we communicate the most healing of messages. I am here with you, not above you. I am not trying to change you. I am willing to understand. Such listening is rare. It is a form of spiritual generosity, and it can only happen when the listener has quieted the internal noise of self-importance. That noise, if left unchecked, distorts all perception. It causes us to interpret what others say through the filter of how does this affect me? How can I respond to look smart, wise, or kind? But true listening says, let me step outside of myself and into your world for a moment. Let me feel what you feel, see what you see, without trying to change the view. This kind of listening is not passive. It is intensely active, but inwardly rather than outwardly. It involves noticing the inner reactions that arise, defensiveness, impatience, superiority, and choosing not to act on them. It means being aware of the ego's desire to speak and pausing long enough to ask, am I speaking to serve or to satisfy myself? This kind of inner discipline transforms conversations into sacred spaces. To influence someone at this level is not to persuade them in the traditional sense. It is to make them feel seen. It is to hold a mirror not of your opinion, but of their essence. When people feel seen without judgment, when they feel understood without being molded, they naturally open. And in that opening, transformation becomes possible, not because we imposed it, but because we created the space in which it could happen. Control, on the other hand, always invites resistance. The more one tries to dominate, the more the other retreats, rebels, or pretends. Control may produce compliance, but never true change. It may shape behavior, but it cannot touch the heart. And if the heart is untouched, the influence is superficial and temporary. But if the heart is engaged, through presence, humility, and empathy, then influence becomes deep, lasting, and reciprocal. This is the paradox of real power. The less we grasp for it, the more we radiate it. The more we surrender the need to control others, the more they are moved by our authenticity. The more we stop trying to prove our worth, the more others experience our worth as undeniable. But this can only happen when the ego's grip is loosened. To live this way requires ongoing inner work. The ego does not dissolve once and for all. It returns in moments of fear, insecurity, or threat. Each interaction becomes a practice, a chance to notice where we are holding tight, where we are speaking from self-defense rather than self-awareness. And with each act of awareness, we reclaim a bit more freedom. We begin to live from the deeper center of our being, where the need for superiority is replaced with the capacity